Oh, it worked. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Yep. What's this? Should we plug in the phone?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So how are we going to hook up the... Well, we'll worry about that first.
Okay.
I did find some good ones. The one that I was going to play originally lost for some
Okay,
reason.
Yeah. All right, see if we can find that.
Okay. Let me see which one I want. Okay. I need to turn on Bluetooth.
Yeah.
So how do I find you? You're going to have to tell me what it is.
It may have already tried to connect to the laptop. So, let me see here. Nope, it didn't. Okay, so should say Anchor Soundcore. Yeah.
Found you. Okay.
Right.
Now we got that done.
And then you should be able to use the volume on your phone to control the speaker.
So we'll just have to play around with that a little bit until we find the right one.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just have to see which one we want.
Okay.
I'll start one, and if we think it's the right one, we'll go with it.
Okay.
So do you want something more heavenly sounding, more thought-provoking?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
So do you want to do the deep meditative state one?
Yeah, why not?
It's 3 hours. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, let's see how loud it is. Okay, is that a good loudness for you?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so I guess we can just start by focusing on, because we want to make this a podcast about good things, heavenly things, positive affirmation.
Change my alignment here. There's supposed to be a great shift in consciousness.
I'll just be staring at the camera, look into my eyes.
I do feel different already about a lot of things. And I had some time to get more rest than usual and reflect on things. I'm not exactly sure how I was able to accomplish this.
Maybe your body was just ready.
I was definitely more tired than usual today after traveling to meet with you. So there does seem to be something afoot. And I have I've never felt such deep regret before in terms of superficiality, in terms of not being able to reach people, in terms of not being able to fulfill goals or be persistent with things. I've tried to stretch things out, but I feel I always need regular feedback, and that's actually destroying my content and causing people to remove their tags when I tag them on LinkedIn and Facebook sometimes. But the biggest thing for me was when a particular old professor of mine who's a feminist, she actually removed her tag from something because either she was supposed to be apolitical or there was something that wasn't quite her area or liability, and that kind of really woke me up. She deeply cares about me, but at the same time, I realized when she posted something quite soon after about a lack of knowledge in college students and stuff like that. I wonder if she was, actually having a bit of an internal struggle about me, and I really worry for the future. I really worry sometimes about the ability of us to educate ourselves. Say, if the college system were to somehow be made obsolete. I'm sorry, there's just no other way to say it. And I deeply miss the college experience. And I transformed that into a vision for the entire world as essentially, one big university.
Creating kind of an environment of learning seems very important to you.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what Surya had said about cleaning up my thinking was correct, but I didn't necessarily need to use the math route explicitly in order to do it. I just had to improve my reasoning by, in theory, improving my brain connections. And one of the ways that I could do this was try and set up habits by being more meditative as I read materials and actually taking some deep breaths and taking some time to actually try and get an extended, full-bodied meaning out of what was being said in the text, rather than just reading the words and having nothing actually be digested. So that's the thing. I could do it with any book, and I wouldn't necessarily have to, spend years on it, as I had, involuntarily as a child with the Bible and stuff like that. At first, I thought it was necessary to, say, change the main book that one was using, but in reality, one could still, say, maintain the same book that they had been looking at for many years, but just keep finding new snippets from other places, and then just thinking really deep about those things. Because sometimes I think that's all that Rudolf Steiner does, because his recordings tend to be pretty long. That's also to say that most books end up being maybe 6 to 8 hours long in their entirety when they're put into audio. So maybe that's not a fair assessment. Anyway.
Let's try to focus on relaxing ourselves.
Okay.
I think we'll get better clarity in our thoughts if we focus on that.
Yeah.
But above all else, I want to keep out any negative influences because this is a time to reflect on God.
Yeah.
So let's try and shift our focus away from our stress and towards the things that God can do for us. So you've known that. I mean, you seem to know basic principles of what they call hypnosis, but it doesn't have to be straight up hypnosis. It can be deep breathing.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you can give me some visuals to think upon, if you can think of some keywords. I mean, even if it were, say, biblical imagery. I mean, that's stuff that's, archetypal, that's been used in, many different cultures. Slight variations, perhaps, but still workable.
What kind of keywords are you interested in?
Well, when Anthony used to do this sort of thing with us at the Pentecostal Charismatic Group, he would do what he called, projecting us into the third heaven, and then he would have us visualize, say, each level of clouds, and then the heavenly choirs with their instruments, and then there were supposed to be boats of some sort on a heavenly sea, and there were supposed to be sort of like things that looked like places on Earth, like because you could access everything from there. I think I'm borrowing a little bit from C.S. Lewis. So if you were in a place where you could see all places on the Earth at once, and then there's also, of course, castles and kind of glittering, and then there's endless fields of flowers. That was one of the things that was talked about in the stories on YouTube. I wanted to include that.
I could actually borrow from a story I wrote.
Yeah.
Those kind of similar. So just focus on relaxing.
Special trees, the tree of knowledge and the good and evil, and the world tree, and
Okay, I'm gonna walk you through. I'm gonna walk you through my own version.
Yeah.
We'll start in this room and work our way out.
Yeah.
Okay, so focus on relaxing your body. I'll do this like a meditative. Just imagine that you are relaxed. Focus only on the relaxation that you want to feel. Whether your eyes are closed or not does not matter, but if it helps you close your eyes, you may.
Yeah.
Lessen your breathing. Just feel your chest going in and out at a slow rate.
Yeah.
Your heart rate begins to slow and your body is relaxing and your mind is relaxing. I'll give you a visual here. Imagine that you're entering a place. Let's imagine your soul is going out of your body. It's going to leave this room. And despite what might be outside right now, we'll imagine there's no clouds. And the first thing you see is a starry night sky. And the presence of an angel is there with you. A beautiful angel with bright light. You can tell that this is your guardian angel, the angel that's been watching over you since you were a child. All the things that you had to go through, this angel was there. He knows every part of you. He's been there for your entire journey, and God sent him to make sure you'd be safe. And this angel has been tasked to now take you.
A sense of overall disillusionment. Just like reflections of my life. Just so much potential lost. But it's more than that. It's just the sense of discovery. And the fact that someone has been there helping, despite feeling at times in the ground, despite at times feeling that situations are not able to be overcome.
This angel is going to take you to your new home. You begin to rise with this angel into a tunnel that has appeared before you. This angel guides you through this white tunnel of beautiful light. You find yourself moving at a speed you did not know you could. It feels like it's faster than the speed of sound, or even light. And before you know it, you're somewhere else. And the angel is not there anymore. But you find yourself in a forest. A beautiful, shimmering, light-filled forest. And suddenly you realize you can do a lot of things that you never could have done before. You notice that your eyesight is perfect. You have perfect clarity of the things around you. If you want to see something that's far away, you can zoom in on it, as if your eyes are binoculars. You also notice a sensation of love, so strong and so present with you. You get the sense that even the plants there love you. In fact, they seem to be singing to you. It's as if when you look at a flower, it's saying to you, I love you. And the trees say, I love you. The grass itself loves you. And you love them. Everything there loves you, and you love everything there. And it's a love that surpasses anything that's here on this earth that you used to live in. You begin to walk in this forest. You feel many sensations, and you see many colors you've never seen before. You feel entirely relaxed and loved. You feel a sensation of deep gratitude in this world. You notice something in the distance approaching you from ahead. You recognize a figure walking towards you. You notice something in his wrists. And you realize that there are holes where his wrists are, and in his feet. And you realize that it's Jesus. And he's smiling at you. In that moment of looking at him, you feel so loved by him, so desired by him, that it's almost as if you're the only thing he loves, like you're the only thing he ever created. Such a deep love. You know you have to run to him, and he runs to you. And you embrace him, just relieved to finally be with the one who created you, the one who's loved you from the beginning. And he's the only one that loves you with that kind of clarity. But everything there loves you. You notice other people are there too, eventually. People you've lost along the way, people you didn't know would be there. People you've always wanted to meet in the past. Your heroes. explore this reality with Jesus. Hilltops with grass of indescribable greenness. You keep going with Jesus. You see many things. There are angels there who are so numerous you cannot count them. At least you wouldn't be able to normally. But you find that not only do you know how many there are, you know their names. You know each one of them as if you've always known them. And every time you ask a question in your mind, you find you don't have to speak, for your questions are answered telepathically. Communication is not in words here, it's in thought too. All of your thoughts, all your feelings are known and responded to with love and gratitude by everyone. You have a deep connection to that world. You could never have imagined that heaven would be this wonderful. The relaxation that you feel, a sense of peace that overwhelms you. You are happy to be there, but
There's a sense of shame that I can't control my mind and I can't control my thoughts. I can't make them perfect. There's a sense of overall weakness and questioning that weakness because there's an imbalance with the purpose that I've been given. I'm not sure why this imbalance exists, but perhaps it's to teach me something.
the Lord prepares to show you life of you before your very eyes. You begin to see the things that have transpired throughout your life. But they do not appear to you as in a movie where it has a clear beginning and end, but rather, since time operates there much differently, you see everything and feel everything at once. But you're not just seeing what you did. You're not just hearing your thoughts. You are seeing their impact. You are feeling the emotions of everyone around you. And God, though He is there, does not judge you. You find that you are judging yourself.
So, did I really belong there? Was I really fulfilling some kind of niche role in every aspect of life that I entered? In every school that I went to, every people that I associated with? And people would say, never insult a group that you belong to. And I never necessarily felt that I belonged to any particular group. Although there were resources made to make me feel welcome at times. But sometimes I figured it was the welcome that could be bought with status. Because once the money runs out, then do people have an exchange token to make themselves feel welcome, to make sure people treat them nice?
You will discover that every event that has ever happened in your life was not a mistake. And know tragedy in your life was wasted. Everything was brought together for the good of God. And while you could not see it at the time, now you begin to realize that everything had carefully been orchestrated to work around the evil to produce good that you could not comprehend. But you also see the effects of the good things that you did for people, as well as the bad. And even your thoughts had impacts that you could not have anticipated. Every bit of good deed, every good deed that you did out of the pureness of your heart was recognized. And you would see the result of those things, how they impacted those people, even years later. But you also would see how the negative things that you did or thought would also impact other people, and you would see the result of that. And that even went as far as the words that you spoke, the text that you sent, the things you posted, the videos you made, and even things like the kind of music you chose to listen to, or the things you said to yourself when you thought no one was listening. All of it did something. All of it had some sort of an impact. Words can heal and curse, and so can thoughts. But God stood silent with you. He did not judge you as you watched this life review. But you felt condemnation in the things you did wrong, and you felt the good in the things you did right. Once the life review was over, you had clarity of where your life was, where you stood with God. So let's take this time to think about that. Let's try to imagine what kind of impact we're having right now. If you had to judge yourself based on the things you did and said and thought, could you give yourself clarity on the things that you've done? And while it would be almost impossible it would be impossible to know what the good could be in the tragedies of your young life and even now. The question I'd like to ask here, the thing I'd like you to think about while we're doing this is, do you believe in God enough to trust Him with those things? Do you believe that God can and has created a plan for your tragedy to turn them into trials that can lead to gold? And that's a question I'd like you to think about. And I'll do the same too.
I don't know how to make what I put out more digestible to people. Everything is just so rapid fire. Everything is just such a big web. It's hard to get really specific. It's kind of boring to just repeat the same thing a number of times just because people need baby steps. And so there's sort of this chasm of understanding between me and just about every group that I've worked with in my independent life. And, I used to think it was just autism or just culture. But it's just, it's so much more than that because I just have so much experience despite seeming to have so little experience because I don't have those tokenistic items that everybody talks about that you're supposed to get in order to be considered fulfilled or successful. I know my place. I have this deep feeling of satisfaction in knowing my place. And um, it doesn't have to be, an exact path and stuff like that. And so it would appear that I appear defiant in some way because every time people have expectations for me, I've always gone down another path. And there are minds that are also more unfocused and wandering than I am. And I fear for them because it's not a very functional level of organization. The thing is, there's a way to be focused and imaginative at the same time. I just feel like everybody around me seems to be somewhat imbalanced in that they don't sense, what's going on. That technically there is no conflict because we all want the same thing, but it just takes so much dialogue in order to fix things. And then, of course, everybody gets so bogged down with the field or profession that they forget their hearts. They forget how to love one another. They forget how to relate to one another. I don't know if there's some kind of, New World Order conspiracy for real, but I suppose it might seem that way only because the invisible constructs that are guiding society may be misleading them. As I had said before, perhaps in some obscure social science textbook, all these things are explained. Some say these things could be found by meditating upon various occult traditions, such as Kabbalah. Many ancient civilizations have left clues and codes for us, but we don't necessarily know how to decode anymore. Some people, they say they have the intuition to do it. I wonder. Some people say they've been reincarnated. I wonder. Or sent for a particular purpose, and they recognize their self from another universe or another galaxy or something, perhaps. Why here? Why now? Does it matter? Do we have to follow an exact path?
Do you think
Are we already perfect in our imperfection? That there's no more striving that we need to do. The imperfection is how the will is eventually carried out and the realizations are being made by going through the differential engine, so to speak, of cycling through the dark and light, the active and passive phases. I think with the information age, we tend to get a lot more active rather than passive. It is so hard for everybody who has effective ADHD, to actually sit down and meditate or focus and read or something. Something that's different, something that puts you into another world, something that separates you from what's going on around you for a minute. If people could figure this out, they could figure out how to deal with suffering they wouldn't be in a Gethsemane, so to speak. So the two towers being the essentially, garden estate towers, if you will, and the one being Eden and the other being Gethsemane. And we use these two poles, so to speak, to discern where we are on our journey towards our crosses, so to speak, or returning to the beginning of all things where everything is new and reconstructed. The place of synthesis as opposed to destruction.
So we're all just trying to find our way.
Yeah. There must be some things that are destroyed and let go of so that we can move on. What are those things that I cling to that don't serve a purpose anymore?
Well, I guess you'd need to know what your purpose is.
Well, obviously, I can't stay on this course because it's continually leading me to ruin, and frankly, I'm not sure I can get out of this rut that I put myself in. It just seems to spiral out of control. And maybe in some ways, there's beauty in it. If only I could become way more reflective, but actually get some kind of cohesive, deeper meaning, just overall really communicate with those around me. I don't necessarily see this as a disorder issue. I see this more as I suppose an awareness of audience issue. And so there has to be some way I can retool my thinking, not my arguments per se about everything, but my thinking that leads to the arguments. I have to rebuild, kind of like Tetris. But that's the thing, though. All my arguments are sort of constructed like Tetris. It's a very trial and error sort of method. I've tried lengthening the period of trial and error, and it seems to work out decently. But the key thing is, I have to keep returning to the fundamentals in every document to understand what's really behind all of
Do you think you need help?
Well, I mean, obviously everybody communicates in big words, and technically, even seeing complex math equations on a page could be big words. It's just a long, painstaking process in turning that into words, but it can be done. You just have to put in the time. And even if you don't know another language at all, and you're translating something from another language, you just have to put in the time. That's the thing. And so, when you really want something, it seems like you pretty much have to sacrifice everything else. I mean, it seems like going to some of the meetings are formalities because it is for those with expertise to present and for them to not feel ignored for their great work. Um, and now I feel at peace with just sitting there and listening for a long time and reviewing things over time. Now things are different. Now I feel I can set things right, except that I wouldn't necessarily have to keep up with the regular things. I can just elongate so that I understand maybe like one particular project and then grab snippets from everything else to try and help put that together. Because mostly everything's already been done. And so the only reason why I would study these things is for myself. For my own enrichment at this time. But of course with the eventual hope that it would benefit others. But if I hide it, then it will never get out, and people will never understand the sophistication behind the methods that we use to govern our souls, even more so than our municipalities. So, not natural enemies per se in terms of different chasms of beliefs and stuff like that, but just sort of at odds, in disagreement, and then I pause for a moment, and it's as if there was no disagreement to begin with. If only I had learned to be so much calmer before burning out to the point of sickness and exposing my weaknesses and shielding from my fear of death. If only I weren't so concerned about letting so many of my words live, then bygones could be bygones as far as concepts, and then I would discover concepts that were more freeing.
Like race?
I suppose so. Just things that would, in general, simplify things. One of the things that ADHD people usually go through is they're always wishing for a break. They're always putting a whole lot of energy into stuff, and yet not really accomplishing a whole lot at all. And every time they get really going, it's time for a break, because if they don't take that break, they get burned out. I think that happens for introverts. I think that happens for autistic people. I think that happens for people who feel they are differently gendered and stuff like that. And there's a lot of things that need to be worked through, whatever the case. There's factors, hundreds of factors, which are the determinants of social and health outcomes. And I don't even think that people can access that knowledge, even if they have the book in front of them. So for years, after I got used to the internet, it was as if I could not read, I could not think, I could not see what I was seeing. You know, I could not really speak what I wanted to speak. It all came across me. It did sometimes feel like I was cursed, like I had some kind of demon, like I had some kind of sign that I was carrying saying, take advantage of me. At least that's the way that Kala had put it. Why did things seem to come so easy for him? And then maybe in the end, they didn't. Why did he seem so much smarter than me? And then maybe in the end, he wasn't. And then as far as surgery, at times he seemed more intelligent than me. And then at times he seemed so distraught that there was no way that he could be that intelligent. But if he were to work through the PTSD, he might exceed me in intellect, and then, I mean by leaps and bounds, and he might find a solution to the situation. But it was my hope before, but perhaps unrealistic, that if he had worked through his trauma, and this would be only one measly factor, and then he would have given up on being trans. All this conflict that led me to leave Lebanon wouldn't happen. Of course, it happened for a reason. Otherwise, I wouldn't have discovered certain things. Perhaps I do underestimate the impact that I have on people's lives. Good impact. Perhaps this is a normal level of reception of naysayers, or even naysaying within people who I believe mostly to be loving. But then I realize it's not necessarily due to their degrees that they're loving. And there are just too many conversations that you cannot have with too many different people. Oh, it's my specialty. And then at the same time, they're generalists who try to, understand everything. Or they think they can hop from specialty to specialty. But it doesn't always work because they don't have a comprehensive understanding. Now, back in the day, people knew how to apply themselves for that comprehensive understanding so that they could be certain that things in one field would transfer to another, or that general professional experience was still part of a greater, more general, more fundamental type of faith, so to speak. And of course, it seems like a great contradiction in that something could be so general, but also be fundamental.
What do you think you really need to move forward?
Better axioms, better logic, better coping mechanisms. But see, these are all more reactive solutions rather than proactive solutions. The thing is, I would destroy a lot of relationships again, but it would be just so freeing just to sometimes let go and let things sort of develop organically. I mean, of course, when Dawood says organically, he refers to within a profession, within a business sense, as far as finding people for the board of Walkway Works and to stock your crop. But I think I could go even more organic than that, even more human uncertainty, if you will. They speak of that way in a lot of different series, I don't know, like Star Trek, where there's sort of a species that's sort of like a celestial being and stuff like that. And there's lots of movies that's like that where people say, that humans face that the capacity for resilience despite randomness is what amazes them about the human condition. Or that, say, someone who has lost a limb or experienced any sort of great loss can not necessarily recover, but because that would be almost synonymous with seeking a cure. But they could cope. They could once again become functional. Maybe achieve a functionality that they never knew they had because it was just blocked for so long. Or a functionality that they did know they had, but they only got glimpses of it every now and then. And then, of course, it was finally overcome and suppressed by the powers that be in the world. These construct wars, these systems of constructs that nobody is fairly conscious of most of the time. And if you were to confront them on it, ask them, what are these things that you're doing? What are these things that you are saying? They either wouldn't know what you were talking about, or even if they did know about them, they might be in denial that they're actually doing these things.
I want to shift focus a little bit here. I have a thought question for you.
Yeah.
Why do you think Jesus was so effective at what he did when he walked this earth, if we were to assume he did, according to the biblical narrative?
Well, I wanted to mention as far as the mode that we were thinking in, so the question might be more of a passive thing, and the thinking might be more of an active thing. So, if I'm asking a question, I shouldn't necessarily answer it immediately. I should reflect on the wording of the question. I should reflect on where it's coming from, the place, so to speak, that it's coming from, and how it can point me on a trajectory toward a particular destination. Another thought destination in, say, abstract space, where I don't know what it'll connect with next, but there's sort of an understanding that can't be put into words that connects these thoughts. in this seemingly random pattern. Yeah. So what was the question again?
What do you think made Jesus stand out so much when he walked this earth? Like, what was it about him that made him who he was?
It definitely brings up more questions. So, first thing I would do is I would replace the word walk with shine, and then I would replace shine immediately with something more like enlighten. As far as the concept of spreading wisdom, and then the whole concept of birth. So I would substitute the word humanity. So the light of wisdom coming to humanity. And so when it does come, it is pervasive, it is cyclical, and sometimes it comes immediately after a return of darkness, which also appears to run in circles. But it seems once an idea runs too far from its source, assuming that all good things come from a higher place, it seems that the further that they get away from the source, that they begin to decay. And that is why there's such a demand for theoretical science. But once it's implemented, there's a thought mechanical loss, just as with physical objects, you have a loss of heat. And so you wonder if there's some kind of loss of thought energy from an idea as it gets molded. So not necessarily there's some sort of new world order that's controlling all of the different governments, religions, whatever. Just more so this idea that there's some sort of natural decay that sort of ironically goes in harmony with the construction of civilizations. If we didn't see the decay, how would we know how to try and reconstruct? Or if we didn't have a vision, how would we know there was something to construct? I guess those are sort of two separate thoughts. But anyway.
So I'd like you to connect that thought that you just had with the thought you've been having about what you need in your own life to succeed. Can you bring those two together and come to a conclusion?
I've never felt any more in my life than now that I've been wasting my time so much, and I've been searching so much more than anything else for connection. These tools that we have to reach the world, they except for substantial amounts of knowledge that I've been able to gain, these tools have mostly proven to be useless, because even as I seemed to be more connected, I was actually less connected, because I wasn't actually going to see people. I wasn't forming deep connections. I wasn't actually interacting like I used to before the internet. It seemed like there were so many messages of hope, but as if hope was gone because of those supposed hopeful and positive messages that kept cycling through on Facebook and even on LinkedIn and so on. And people would be speaking in, such complex vocabulary and at length and stuff like that. But even speaking at length and even speaking with complex vocabulary doesn't necessarily communicate. At the same time, why would one deny oneself the ability to communicate at a level that was appropriate for themselves? Why would one not want to develop that simply because others felt that they were being left behind? If someone actually does have significant intelligence, that's not a flaw in being able to communicate with others. It's a matter of finding the right audience. And yet, we're so separated, and the barrier to actually proving that we're intelligent is so financially expensive, emotionally expensive, and chasmically expensive as far as getting other people to realize the importance of what we're trying to do, and at the same time, the non-importance of what we're trying to do in terms of something external. We don't need external rewards for this. We don't need to prove anything to anyone. But it's not so much that we need to prove our intelligence to ourselves. It's more so that we want to discover ourselves and be completely fulfilled, just like anyone else. But there's this sense that it's extra, that we would cost too many resources because, say, for a disabled person that's going from -1 to 0, and then for a gifted person to be fully fulfilled, going from 0 to +1. And then, of course, many of the rich take advantage of the fact that they can practically buy their kids into giftedness. And perhaps it has nothing to do with giftedness per se, because all it may be is a unique perspective in recursions, and then these recursions shape the brain over time to be able to see things that others don't. But there's no standard for justifying what the unique perspective sees, or that the perspective is unique at all.
It seems like you're acknowledging that you'd almost need something that maybe can't be found here.
On this earth?
It seems that way. At least not from just people.
A great deal of time I do live in another world, and sometimes I don't want to be in my body. And I think spiritually, for somebody like Sergei, who's so desperate, he thinks he actually needs to change his body in order so that he might receive what he perceives to be giving in terms of love. And as I may have said before, at this time, there are many people who are born one gender or the other, or I should say, one biological sex or the other, to be exact, and then they have decided that they needed to be the other in order to obtain love. That wasn't the way I wanted to word it. Let me try and go deep for a second. Yeah, the self-image. So, I would say at this time, a lot of men battle self-hatred, and the thing is, if they're determined to remain male and attempt to fulfill a role without being able to fulfill that role, they have to constantly be at war, it seems, for their very meaning and purpose in life. Because society has basically determined that, they are no longer necessary. If someone were to write a book about the masculinity crisis, I would say the title ought to be The Abolition of Male, as opposed to The Abolition of Man, which was a book by C.S. Lewis. But anyway, and then of course, I keep thinking, Gentile or Jew, servant or free, woman or man, no more. All those distinctions go away, kind of like, what Ram Dass was talking about. When we're sort of wearing this spacesuit, so to speak. All the outer characteristics that make us, look good to other people and stuff like that. And those superficial things, a lot of people who would go transgender would think that those are the things that matter, and that it has something to do with the body and or with the identity. And I understand Richard's frustration at anybody who sort of would undercut his work in any way, because as a disabled person, he has had to at least physically put in 3 to 5 times the amount of exertion as everyone else, as he has cerebral palsy. And so he carries that philosophy into every aspect of his life, which I feel why he's so critical of various other groups. I really struggle with that sometimes. How he could be, so compassionate to me, but then at times just letting his mouth fly with the racism and stuff like that. And as I reflect, I might have, done that at some point too, because I was just so exasperated looking for an answer as to who was stirring the bowl, who was making the mess, and nobody was really making a mess, just systems of things in conflict. And perhaps if we only understand the part of the iceberg that's above the water, then we will never, solve these problems. And so these fundamentals are actually way more complex than we thought them to be. I mean, simple building blocks perhaps, but the whole body of these simple building blocks is so much greater than we expected. And every time we hit something down and another thing pops up, it's like whack-a-mole, somebody once said. So everybody's looking for the easy way out, the easy way to still maintain an identity that feels unique, that can't be seen, that can't be detected, and yet still selectively be seen, or we want to be seen. You can't be seen and unseen at the same time. You can't have your privacy and yet desire recognition. It doesn't work that way. When I was reading Larry King, he was saying it was very rewarding, but it was also very challenging to be a reporter, because he had to expect a barrage of anger from citizens, from politicians, from co-workers and supervisors. Everything had to be just right. And the thing is, sometimes you were as right about a report as how much people did not sue you for it. But if people didn't sue you for it or write you angry letters, then you weren't doing your job as a reporter. So, and it's a paradox, because we're so used to thinking in utilitarian terms, or hedonistic being about what brings the most pleasure. They even came up with a unit called the hedon. And utilitarianism is about basically what makes you feel better. So you go to the doctor or any other middleman type of professional, and you say, what's going to make me feel better? Oh, here's a pill. Oh, here's a special herbal supplement. Or, oh, here's, spending time with family and friends, or drinking a little bit more wine, or, I don't know, getting a little more exercise. And then everything is just so prescriptive, but it's just so much more complicated than that. Everybody thinks that you can summarize all this stuff in one book, but there are literally millions of papers out there that have been read, and some unread, some with crucial information. And it's an incredible amount of information to sort through. Maybe AI will sort through it. But it never seems as simple as a few simple things, at least not in the long run, as far as figuring out how something works and figuring out how to use it for our best game, so to speak. Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned what might be under the iceberg, so to speak. If you were to guess, what do you think it is?
What is a token? What is a certification? What is an authority? what justifies authority? What is the justice that justifies authority?
So what's the ultimate authority?
What destructive force is possible throughout humanity without authority? Or what better civilization could be built without earthly authority? Some sort of, I guess, command system that would operate like a spiritual realm, but wouldn't have to be emulated through a literal federal government with, people in it. And of course, I take the word federal to be related to the word father. And so we created our systems of government to try and imitate the father's love. And so now there's sort of like a withdrawal period, if you will. See, sometimes in theology they speak of, and these are not exact words, they sometimes speak of times of, deep sense of God's love and connection and communion, if you will. Times when it's available, like when certain universes overlap or something, and then other times you feel sort of a sense of abandonment, if you will, which is of course why they would use parental stuff as the analogy. And so we describe our connection with the universe as deities that govern us, that are that if they're complete persons, then most of the time we are not seeing most of them. We're only seeing a couple constructs that are part of the hundreds of constructs of each concept deity, if you will. For example, the Greeks had a god representing the sports. And so when we watch a sport, we only think about, the players and what they're doing on the field. But we're not thinking about their full lives and what say sports mean for society overall. So it's just, okay, we're doing a ritual where they used to say it as they were essentially, worshiping that god or goddess whenever they were having a sports event. But I mean, they didn't really need to do any literal in a temple kind of ritual. So
in a way, they were Pharisees.
Well, the thing is, if we didn't practice any professions, then we as people would be dead. We would have no reason to live. And so we always characterize, these sorts of things as young and old. But it seems to me that, the more earthbound we are, the more we feel we need to develop more laws in order to protect ourselves. And when we stop protecting ourselves, then we learn to actually be able to socialize with others. We develop some sort of heuristics or shortcuts that makes things easier. And then of course, when people get divorced, perhaps they go back to, some sort of childlike state, but, even become, say, twice the Pharisee to protect themselves because they've given up on trusting people. They've actually started to believe that that some people actually inherently are satanic, so to speak. I mean, I don't doubt that the goal of certain people is to actually, offer their bodies up to some evil presence so that they can obtain power. I mean, there's probably, something out there that does that, but I would say more so it's contained in
I mean, witchcraft is that.
misuse of words, misuse of power in words and documents, so to speak. Well, generally speaking, um, yeah. Do you know about the right hand path and the left hand path concepts?
No.
Okay, so the left hand path is basically selfish magic, and the right hand path is basically benevolent, like altruistic kind of magic. And but the thing is, it's actually an analogy for any hidden laws that would govern people that people wouldn't be always consciously aware of or looking up or whatever. And so the thing is, anybody who has a lot of power in society, they're going to be able to protect themselves by making it look as if they're doing the altruistic right-hand path with their manipulation of the law, and when they're actually doing the left-hand path, which is essentially the definition of manipulation, to gain the advantage. And sometimes, people will do a little bit of both, which is, of course, why we have on the dollar bill the eagle carrying both the spears and the olive branches. So, so that's the thing. It was stated at the Pentecostal Charismatic Group where Sergey and I were that Christianity could be tooled for use as essentially a form of witchcraft, because you see, Sergey and Marianne were actually accused of witchcraft in the group. They were accused of manipulating the group. I had no clue how Sergey was able to control like 20 people who were like 20 years older than him or more. I mean, it just boggled my mind. And so when John Paul Peters sort of, declared that Sergey's authority was taken away and that everything that he was sensing on other people was actually inside him. I don't quite understand the whole concept of like projection, but it just seems to me that in order to justify his instability, Sergey had to learn to be able to be adept with the laws, so to speak, of psychology. And maybe he wasn't necessarily doing this consciously, but that's the thing, in terms of the Freudian sense, it's always the thing that you're trying to avoid that exposes the hypocrisy. A really weak point where you're potentially going into black and white thinking, where you hold where essentially you hold a double standard, to yourself that's different from others around you. And yeah, and so we create all these dualities. Every time you see a duality, it's an opportunity for a manipulation. And it's almost like impossible for everybody to keep track of these dualities. We can try to make it simple, like in astrology, that there's a Jupiter Saturn kind of relation or a Mars Venus type of relation, but that doesn't always work in real life, because there's other earthly factors that we have to take into consideration. And the thing is, when you run out of food, when you run out of clean water, when you run out of housing, what will you do as a society? Even if you're supposed to marry a particular person, live in a certain neighborhood, live a certain lifestyle, do a particular career, travel to certain places. And for some people, it comes so easy because of where they were born. We have studies showing this. And so it's a struggle to find meaning and purpose when you are so isolated from people who can give you meaning. I mean, sometimes literal isolation, but I would say definitely for a person who's gifted or a person with a disability, I would say they definitely feel it 10 times more. How's the battery on that laptop?
Looks pretty good.
Halfway?
More than halfway.
Oh wow, that's pretty over. We definitely need more of this type of thing. We definitely need to bring back this type of psychotherapy, the whole on the couch thing, if you will, so that people can be in touch with their feelings. I mean, meditation with intent is good, but at the same time, when the experience isn't shared, then, and when people cannot trust each other, then they cannot form a cohesive body of what they believe, and they can be easily manipulated by, say, a mere two beliefs, as in duality, or a mere four beliefs, as in characterization of one person as another person. One person is never another person.
That's why the Trinity is so confusing to people.
What?
That's why the Trinity is so confusing.
Oh. Well, that's why the federal government is so confusing. The federal government itself is a trinity of sorts. So, so that's the thing. It would seem that they all contain, the same aspects, but to different degrees. Being as the commander in chief is sort of like God the Father, can make war against foreign and domestic powers. If he did it to a domestic power, it would be like Job. But and then of course the thing that would be like Jesus would be like, the lawyer-like profession, which is legislators in the Congress. And then they sort of, form the body of Christ as they are the elect every election cycle. And then, there's this sense that, when one has not served in office, it would seem that you're sort of locked out of heaven, so to speak. And then, of course, the Supreme Court is like the supreme interpreter of the spirit of laws that are contained within Word, and the Word is God. And when that manifests, it manifests in people.
So we're the Holy
That
Spirit.
means people are transformed. So when people get degrees, that represents transformation. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you get, the highest job, so to speak, or the highest type of job. So you get the degree for yourself because you have meaning and purpose in yourself, because the Word is within you, because you ate some scrolls that had to do with the more advanced things, the higher things, the things of God, so to speak. And then, of course, the highest ones, are called doctors, or in the case of PhDs, doctorates. You know. And then so then, when people actually get a job in the administrative parts of a corporation or company, then that is, say, the manifestation of the Word, when the Word is given authority, when the sacrifice of time is finally recognized, and it has been known that the person has been a laborer in the vineyard, so to speak. So essentially, all the different fields, they sort of flowed out of the religious field. Generally speaking, back in the day, people used to set their whole lives aside for some of these professions so that they could obtain the highest knowledge. And so usually the work of things like science would be reserved for monks who had sort of shut themselves away from society and stuff like that, because they really wanted to reach the higher things. They didn't believe in, the material world all that much. So now it seems like people are more using all this knowledge to get better materials, and they're not happy with cyclical consumption. They're just, as they say in one movie, making a copy of a copy of a copy. So the thing is, it's like they are living out the Word, but they've lost the meaning of the Word because they're turning it into a consumable rather than a thinkable. And maybe that word doesn't quite do it justice, because usually when people say think, they mean something that can be done in a short amount of time. But as Daniel Kahneman says, to activate System 2, you need to give yourself more time and more quiet. Or, as it is said in the supposed CIA shortcut method of learning things, learn to tolerate more interruptions, and then nothing will affect you. Actually, that's the way that military boot camp works too. You know, when the drill sergeants stand around you en masse and yell in your face, it's called smoking you. But see, it trains you to shut out so much, so that nothing negative will affect you, so that your brain can discern, um, and be free despite being in, an unfree, oppressive world. You know you will still succeed because your training will overcome what is in the world. And I suppose you could liken that to Christianity, or say the Jedi Knights in Star Wars. I always thought that they were, referring to the Jesuits when they were talking about Jedi, but there's also some, Hindu references in there as well. So, just a lot of interesting things come together. I definitely can't do it justice. There have been whole philosophy books written on Star Trek, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, or other epics that are essentially based on Western values with Christianity at the core, or maybe a version that's been infused with some paganism, but still the same basic idea. And then you begin to see that just about all the media seems to be, focused on that sort of philosophy. It's almost like they are, referencing Hegel. And so some people want to just go back to before Hegel and say, there's no excuse for you not, accepting some sort of, savior figure that is just able to, you know, argue off anything that you say. Um, um, and of course, in the Platonic sense, the whole idea of logic and science was not to prove something, but to disprove everything possible, just so you hadn't left anything out. As far as thinking that something was true, because it could lead to undesirable operation if you were operating under a principle that you thought to be true that was actually not true. So it was better to have more untruths than it was to, have a lot of truths which were, say, mandated by the law, because then people could game the system and they could change the law in their favor without anybody else noticing, really. It's not necessarily how it's written, it's how it's interpreted secretly, and how it's used. So if George W. Bush had said, that the great Satan was over there somewhere, or that it was an axis of evil, or that, or if the Democrats were to lose their emotions and say, oh, there's a Nazi. Well, the thing is, if you were to call somebody a dark Christ, it would be the same as calling somebody a light Christ in essence, because if Jesus says, when you're looking for a particular special somebody, you point, oh, he's there in the church, or he's there in the law profession or the medicine profession, or he's, high up in the heavens or far down in the earth, And we talk about these sort of magnetic people who have, more trendy, earthy characteristics, or people who are, flighty and always in another place in their mind, you know. Um, and the thing is, in the long run, that in itself doesn't matter so much. So anywhere we tend to look, it's not about looking at any particular place for an evil great one or a good great, and that's the thing. So that directly contradicts the principle that Hegel used to talk about the phenomenology of spirit. Of course, Hegel talks about a zeitgeist, and a Weltgeist, and a Volksgeist. But the thing is, contradicting the whole idea of the Volksgeist, Jesus said, no place to rest his head, the Son of Man, and anybody who has, like special calling or something like that, they don't have a people, even though they were born into a people and into its traditions, they never feel like they belong anywhere. And then, the idea that somebody who's, chosen is supposed to help, nail down the zeitgeist and make it go away. Well, the thing is, you know, each person of the century, so to speak, you know, can't just make the zeitgeist go away. I mean, oftentimes, um, if they want to be, representing a particular ruling concept, if you will, that comes back strong later, sometimes they're, killed for what they believe. And that tends to be what happens. They tend to pick the less visionary person to spare, the Barabbas, and then they kill off the more visionary figure, whoever that may be. And, be it Jesus or Gandhi or MLK Jr. and so on and so forth. And then of course, the Weltgeist. Well, the thing is, we say in this world, but not of this world. And of course, in the principle of samadhi, they say, the best we can do is only get, some glimpse of like our oneness with all of other human beings on this planet. And and the thing is, sort of a microcosm of that would be, a Chabad or a koinonia kind of feeling within our faith community. But to be able to apply that to the whole of humanity, takes some kind of strength, if you will. So, so the thing is, it actually is less worldly, incidentally, to be thinking of humanity as a whole, as a single organism, as they sometimes say. But the idea that there is a zeitgeist or a blindness of every century, that's invalid because if it applies to a light Christ, it also applies to a dark Christ, if you will. So a dark ruling concept, if you will, would be just as hard to find as a light ruling concept, if you will. And so that's why we're not supposed to point out, even when we see it indiscriminately. But of course, nobody believes that they point out evil indiscriminately because they're people of laws, and so they consider themselves very lawful. without those laws being actually explicitly stated. Civil law is always explicitly stated, but laws of sociology, laws of psychology, laws of anthropology are not always so easily stated. And that's why they can be used by very advanced, high IQ people to manipulate. I suppose you could, sort of casually call them all Satanists, but I mean, I don't believe they, actually worship an evil deity called Satan or anything like that. And nor do I believe they twist what's in the Bible, because they probably don't even read the Bible. So they just sort of live in a world apart from us, it seems. And it seems like the only reason why we have hope for, the return of a particular fundamental idea in a ruling concept is because we need something to live for, because exact logic suggests, there are no miracles, there's no heaven, there's no God, blah, blah, but in your heart, because you want to know goodness that will help you cope with any struggle, because life is hard for everyone. And so that seems to be, sensing the presence of God when you finally create some sort of web of strategies for living well, despite uncertainty, despite difficulty, despite even marginalization and oppression. Marginalization is when somebody systematically tries to destroy your opportunities, or even tries to stop your very thoughts, before you even make them, using counterintelligence, so to speak. It's supposed to make you look stupid and not know what you're talking about. But for the autistic person, it always feels like any general person in society is part of this, counterintelligence operation. But that's not a conspiracy theory. That is the way that we experience it. It's not paranoia. It's just a fact of life. We usually, don't tell people this, or we come up with more flowery ways of saying this so that they don't, try and confine us in some way or another. But often we do get, confined anyway, once people, find out our feelings and find out that just about everything we say is incorrect in one way or another. We don't say the right things at the right times. We appear to be rude and disruptive. We appear to be, pushing something that should not have urgency in, say, a professional setting. And so it's that problem with, taking out the personal element of the professionals. Even the professions which are supposed to help the people in the most dire circumstances, they're unable to do their job because A, they don't have enough colleagues, and B, they're frankly trained to not care. They're trained to be so objective and logical that they don't realize that entire systems are deflecting people's needs to the point where there's so much suffering in the world that, you know, a third of the world's population might as well be dead. And it wouldn't make a dime's difference to those who were to die, and it wouldn't make a dime's difference to those who were to live. Because the ones who were dying would want the mountains to fall on them, metaphorically. And the ones who were living just would keep on consuming information, consuming degrees, consuming powers.
And what if in the end the roles were reversed?
What do you mean?
Like, what if the Christians were the ones being persecuted in this world and shut down? And the ones who were getting rich and famous in this world found themselves getting the brunt end of the worst punishment.
Well, I would say Christian is just another word for a de facto Roman citizen who likes some of the principles of Judaism, and perhaps in the Catholic version who likes some version of paganism. But that's the thing. So I would say the reason why